Hi everybody, welcome to Capgemini's World Energy Markets Observatory. This is the 26th edition. My name is James Forrest. I'm the Global Industry Leader for Energy Transition and Utilities. I'm delighted to be joined today by Colette Lewiner, Florent Andrion and Peter King. As you can see, we've adopted a slightly different style for this WEMO. We've divided into 4 different chapters that you can dive into, as you can see there on the screen. This is the first one of those chapters, which is called the Geopolitical Situation. We look forward to your feedback on the analysis.
This year, we've seen a lot of conflict, particularly in and around energy sites and energy routes. In the Ukraine, there is everyone is very much aware of the war, but the war now encompasses 2 nuclear power stations. In the Red Sea, tensions there mean that now oil and gas shipments are going around the Cape of Good Hope instead. There are many other places. Ethiopia and Egypt are in tension around a dam, and obviously Taiwan and China remain very tense at the moment. There's also 64 countries this year that are holding elections. We don't yet know what the impact of the US election will be on the Inflation Reduction Act. But we do know that in the UK, a new government has come in and said there will be no new oil fields in the North Sea. There's a new European Parliament, which is taking a much stronger hand on directing energy policy and the energy transition. And within all of this, we have to be aware that the short-term life of politicians, typically 4 or 5 years, is much shorter than the long-term needs that we have for energy projects, which are normally measured in decades. Fortunately, this year, energy prices have remained stable. This has been predominantly due to a massive increase in production by the US, but tensions do remain. And whilst the oil price has remained below $95 a barrel throughout the year, we don't know how long this can carry on for with tensions increasing. If we look into Europe, we see the impact of the Russian oil embargo. It's well known that the Russian oil or Russian gas production into Europe reduced from 40% a few years ago to now just 15%. That's mostly been replaced by American and Qatari liquefied natural gas. But the EU is still buying 50% of all Russian exports. And whilst they've introduced the possibility of a complete ban by countries, no countries have taken that up as yet.
Indeed, as Pete was saying, we have seen a drop in prices, energy prices, which is critical for our energy market. For instance, natural gas price have fell in all geographies after its spike in 2022, and that's mainly due to several factors, such as reduced demand in Europe and in Asia, as well as lower gas storage needs. The share of Russian gas in EU imports fell from above 40% to less than 18%, 17% in June 24, while imports from partners like Norway or the United States have increased to compensate the drop in Russian gas. In Europe, price dropped nearly 70%, averaging $13 per MBTU in 2023. And this decline was facilitated by reduced injection into storage and a strong influx of LNG, notably from the US. This development have eased the European market while offering a competitive advantage in the US, where gas is slightly lower in terms of pricing. And if we look now at electricity spread price, they have as well reduced after historic peaks in 2022, and they return to stable levels, notably due to at least 3 factors. The first one is the development of renewable power production, which have increased significantly in 23 and is continuing in 24. The return to nuclear production in France, the commissioning of reactor after the repairs due to the corrosion issue, stress corrosion, has helped stabilize the electricity supply across Europe. And third, a decrease in consumption, lower consumption, partly due to the moderated industrial demand, has also contributed to this reduction in price. When we look at the the spread between US and Europe electricity price, and we see that the US also continue to have an advantage in terms of having lower electricity pricing. Another topic to consider when talking about geopolitics is the dominance of China in low carbon technology, which is clearly significant in almost all the current technology. If you look at solar panels, over 80% of solar panels are produced in China. Likewise, in the windmills, wind turbines, which are produced over 60% in China. Including in nuclear, where now China has the third nuclear fleet after the US and France. And you also need rare earths and metals for this energy transition, for a lot of the elements, for batteries, for windmills, etc. And they are massively produced, massively refined in China, over 90% of it. So that creates also a lot of challenges for Western countries who want to try to be a bit more independent from China. Battery is the same. Gigafactory represent over 72% in this domain. So that raises clearly challenges to Western countries to balance between low price and available technologies provided by China, but at the same time the need to create industrial jobs in their own countries and diversify a bit their sources of supply.
Just to focus a little bit more on the request for metals, we can see here that, as Florent said, China has a dominant position in refining those rare earths and rare metals. You see the chart where you see the growth need of rare metals. Well, lithium, you see it's growing. Also graphite, because the anodes are in graphite, and this is imported from China, copper and other metals. I want to focus here on lithium. You can see here that the chart shows a sort of exponential growth of lithium requests over years. But recently, there is a slowing down of the EV market and the batteries for EVs. And we can see that the prices of lithium have gone down quite significantly. Probably there will be recycling first of lithium, recycling of batteries. We've covered that in detail last year with the black mass, which is what's getting from the recycling, and then the metals will be separated. Also, a move on sovereignty. Countries want to be more in charge of those supplies. And just a few examples, the French Eramet has opened a big mine in Argentina. And also lithium is found in brimes, for geothermal brimes, and also brimes from oil and gas exploration. And Exxon has decided that it wants to be a very major actor in this field. Just to focus on rare earth elements, rare earths are not rare in the sense they are quite well spreaded, but they are very difficult to extract. This is why they are called rare earths. They are really indispensable for energy transition. For example, if you think of the rotors of the windmills, you need those rare earths. In a lot of motors, you need them. And again, China has a dominant position in not so much extracting, but refining that. It is only accounting for 30% of the reserves, but 60% of production and 85% of processing capacity. Just a spotlight on Greenland. Greenland, so you perhaps remember that President Trump wanted to buy Greenland a few years ago. Why? Greenland is a very rich resource, has a lot of resource in rare earth elements, has also graphite, has also oil and gas, but this will be very difficult to extract. Just to illustrate the fact that the world is looking at other sources of those rare metals and rare earth elements and probably will find and exploit that. I want to also stress the fact that sovereignty policies have a sort of limitation. We are in a very connected world. If you look at the connections, telecom connections, the length of the wires is 33 times the Earth's circumference. So it's huge. Also, exchanges, global exchanges are $32 trillion, so also very big. And so it's very difficult to impose embargoes that are respected. Embargoes are often circumvented. In history, it's also the case. And just one example, the US is putting high tariffs on solar panels coming from China. Now, it's only officially 1% of their supply from abroad. But recently, Chinese panels coming from India have surged to 11%. And there is some suspicion that these are really coming from China and just transiting through India. So showing that sovereignty policies have limitation in a very connected world as our world today.
Our overall recommendation of this first chapter is that the world needs to adopt sound sovereignty policies. We're recommending this because China has again increased its dominant position both in the clean technologies and in the rare earth materials as well. In addition, Western countries are implementing sovereignty policies. There are embargoes and tariffs on many things. We just talked about the US tariffs on the Chinese PV. There's also a number of laws that are encouraging domestic production, like the Inflation Reduction Act. However, we're in a global world, and those can all be circumvented. And secondly, the costs are increasing for our citizens in moving to the energy transition. So we think that we need peaceful agreements to achieve the energy transition. However, those agreements are probably going to be harder in the current geopolitical situation, and we need to wait for that to decrease before we can achieve sound sovereignty approaches. Thank you, Colette. Thank you, Florent. Thank you, Pete. Please do look at the next chapter on the low carbon technologies.